You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
I never gave a second thought. I never gave a second thought. I followed blindly, part of the lot. I never gave.
Hey everybody, today's guest is Brian Baker from Dag Nasty, Bad Religion, also played in Minor Threat, plays in the Beach Rats, he's played with Junkyard, been in a ton of bands, and he's been amazing in all of them. I love Brian's style, and I love him as a person, and you know, he's one of those guys that paved the way for people such as myself to be in a punk rock band and have a quote-unquote career at it. Brian picked the Dag Nasty classic, Can I Say, to discuss today. Brian talks about how in the early days, everyone got writing credit on all the songs. He talked about how a lyric like, I defended what I should have denied, is very much his style of lyric. Dag Nasty, this is interesting, they recorded the entire album twice. I'd love to hear the first take on that. Brian remembers sitting on his futon on the floor of a group house playing the guitar and coming up with the guitar parts of Can I Say. Brian did not think that they were making songs that would have been revered 30 years later. Getting a real job was absolutely unacceptable for Brian. He had to figure out how to make being in a band work. He talked about how not a lot of artists were writing the socially conscious type of lyrics that Dag Nasty was writing in the 80s. Punk rock was still very much protest music. And we talked about how fanzines were the original analog podcasts. And I give a shout out to my friend Bill Weaver. He was the first guy back in high school to play me Dag Nasty, and I loved him from the first time I heard him. For all this and much more, stay tuned.
Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast.
Brian, of course, started out in Minor Threat and then moved on to Dag Nasty, formed in 1985. And Brian picked the song Can I Say? Tell us about this one, Brian. You know, when I did a little research on it, I noticed that it's the writing credits were attributed to everyone in Dag Nasty. So did you have a hand in writing this one, or Dave, or who put this one together?
Well, you know, way back in the 20th century, when everything was in black and white and you were in a punk band, what you did is you credited the whole band for everything.
Right.
So in some cases that works out well for me, like saying, you know, that Ian MacKaye, who wrote 98% of the lyrics for Minor Threat, you know, when it comes to, you know, splitting up that T-shirt money, it's the same even for the little bass player who basically did very little.
Right, but there was no money back in the 80s, so no one really gave a shit either, right?
You know what's funny? But take this. That's how we split up Beach Rats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you.
That's just what you do. I mean, it's really, I don't know. There's a lot of, it's the constant argument. Is it, are you going to be Democratic, socialist, or communist, using the most limited definitions, the dumb guy definitions of all three of those systems. And
right.
For the most part, there's been, you know, communism was the way to split up shit. But I picked Can I Say because I did write the music, and Sean wrote a lot of the words. I think in that day when we were that little, everyone kind of just gathered around a notepad. Like Sean would have, you know, some words, and then Roger would go, why don't you change that word from disagree to fuck you? Oh, that's better. That's stronger. Good, Raj. And looking at Can I Say, I texted Sean. I was like, what did you write? He goes, I think I wrote everything, but I'm not sure. And I looked at the lyrics to Can I Say, and there's a couplet that says, I defended what I should have denied. And that's straight up Baker right there. That's that's so like, you know, armchair
Brian.
Yeah. But so it's really, I mean, I think Sean wrote most of it, but I see some edit in the lyrical portion of it. But the music I had, and the reason I picked it It is, I think, the first or second Dag Nasty song that I had written and brought in. So it's very early. I don't remember which was. I don't know if it was first or not.
Right.
And in just spending a little time analyzing it, I just noticed, I can I can go back and see where I got, where I stole from and how it all worked out. So it's kind of an interesting thing to look at.
Well, it's amazing to me that and a lot of times when you're talking about songwriting, I like to talk about the production because it really lends itself. Some songs possibly could have been quote unquote hits, but the production sound like crap. For 1986, I mean, this recording, I mean, it's leaps and bounds above what else was going on, and the bands that I love from that era, even Descendants. I mean, this record sounds so friggin' good, recorded analog. Do you remember much about the recording process and what Ian brought to the table producing wise?
Well, sure. It was exactly the same equipment and the same, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was, God, I should probably know this. There's a chance that this is a 16-track recording.
Right.
And that might have something. I would have to call Don because he would know.
Because I have the original disc, not remastered. I mean, this is the original thing, and
Yeah.
no one sounded like this in '86. I mean, I didn't hear a Dag Nasty till probably I was 15 in '88, so '88 or '89, and I was playing baseball. And we used to drive to the baseball games on the school bus, and my friend Bill Weaver, he had this Walkman, and he's like, "Dude, check this out!" And it was Wig Out of Denko's, and it was the first time I'd ever heard you guys. And I was just so struck by it because I lived in this little town. It was a oppressive little town in Florida. Our record store was the Camelot in the mall. It was, we had nothing. You had to go drive 2 hours to Tampa to see a show. And, you know what was going on in the late 80s. Nothing sounded like this. And to go back now, 30 plus years later, and to listen to it with fresh ears, it's amazing how and not blowing smoke up your ass, man. It's just it sounds so friggin' good and clean. I mean, that I got lost in a lot of the stuff that my friends were getting in, quote unquote punk. It just okay, it's out of time, it's out of tune, and someone's screaming. That sucks.
Right.
Like I loved stuff with melody, and it just sounds amazing. So. Do you remember like how long it took to record? Was it a couple days?
Well, the only reason I was trying to figure out if it was 16 or 8 is because I know Out of Step was the first 8-track recording at Inner Ear. We were like we were the guinea pigs,
right,
for him getting that machine. And I was just trying to see if maybe the Dag Nasty record, if anything had changed in Don's studio, that would have contributed to that. But I think it's probably just experience that, this is a recording that was done a couple of years later and you just get better at it. And, Don and Ian know what they're doing, and they have, there's so many Discord records that just sound different and better, in my opinion, than their contemporaries. In recording Dag Nasty, I don't remember specifically what happened, but I've done a lot of records with Don and Ian, and my guess is this. We recorded it all in one day, and then we mixed it in another day. Would seem like what we would do at that time. Possibly 2 days of recording, because I know this record, we had demoed basically we had made the entire record with Sean Brown, and when we got Dave to sing, we redid the record. And so we may have paid more attention to, we may have taken a little extra time.
So how rehearsed were you guys? Because again, I mean, there's no Pro Tools here. There's no fixing shit. I mean, you guys, it's tight.
Well, we were totally rehearsed. I had a pretty serious work ethic, and so did the other guys. I mean, we wanted to be really good. And there's just a style, I don't know, it's just kind of the DC thing. Like, we rehearsed constantly. We wanted to be prepared for this thing. Dag Nasty was a point in my life where I wanted to put together a band so I could get out of Washington and actually tour in other cities. And I never got to other countries. I think that time going to another country was still this impossible like walled off fantasy.
Right.
You never realized that you could actually, I don't know, why don't you just fly to London? Like no one ever thought about it. It's dumbasses.
Well, no, I mean, just think about, God, it's so hard to think back then, but you couldn't check out London with a click of the button at a computer. It was a foreign world. It was,
right.
There was fear.
Yeah. But it's just funny. Like when you go and you find, I mean, not to get on a tangent, but there were bands who are contemporaries of Dag Nasty who one of those band members went, well, I don't know. Why don't I just call and see if I can find a promoter in Helsinki? And then they called somebody in Finland who answered the phone and spoke perfect English and said, well, yeah, if you guys can, take Finnair and come into Helsinki, we can do 2 shows. We just never even thought about it. We're so dumb. I really wish. But that aside, back to what you're hearing with this record. The guitar sound, I wasn't into, unfortunately, I was pretty into chorus pedals. Which is, can I say, I think has a chorus pedal that I never turned off the whole time.
That's funny. I don't really hear that.
I think, yeah, there is. I was very into this MXR chorus, this yellow box that plugged into the wall, had 4 knobs on it, and it's now like kind of a collectible piece, and gear nerds are really into it. But it's incredibly dirty. Like it's not at the time we didn't realize that it had a lot of whoosh to it, even standby. But I was playing a Les Paul through a stock Marshall through a 412 with a chorus pedal, and so there wasn't a lot of discharge guitar sound. There wasn't a lot of that early punk that's a little chaotic. There's tube screamers, there's just MXR distortion, there's just
crate amps.
Yeah, we had really good equipment because it was important to us to have good equipment. And, Roger went and bought a P-Bass, and we had an SVT and a Galen Kruger head because that's what you had in 1985. Because that's what the Descendants had, and everyone wanted to be the Descendants. It was like, you look at who's pro? The Descendants.
Right. Well, I feel like, whether unfairly or not, that the Dag Nasty just gets so overlooked. Of course, you hear Minor Threat, you hear Black Flag, you hear Descendants from that time period. But Dag Nasty and the sound of especially, can I say, just this record in general, to me, and I love all the aforementioned bands, it's just leaps and bounds. There's something special about it. It's just tight. It's clean. The guitars are clean, and it's unmistakably your style. When you go to the lead parts, you can just tell. I can tell it's Brian Baker, and that's really cool. So going back to this song in particular, you remember creating it? Do you remember like coming up with the chords and what was that thought process like? If you could take us back.
I believe I was living in my first, I think it was right when me and a bunch of friends moved into a group house in Arlington. It was like maybe 10 blocks from Discord House. And Arlington is just across the bridge from DC. It's when people, the historic DC that everybody talks about, and everyone talks about the old 930 Club. I lived closer to the 930 Club living in Virginia than I did where I grew up in DC proper. So it was really, this was a little suburb that was very working class, and they would rent a big beat up house to a bunch of lunatics with motorcycles and bleached hair with an unhealthy obsession with Mad Max. It was like, and I think I really, when I'm looking back and seeing it, I think I remember just like sitting on my futon, of course, on the floor of the room and smelling the fresh paint that was a color that was available because someone made a mistake.
Vomit pink.
Yeah, or whatever's there. Ooh, that'll be weird. Children. And yeah, I just had, I know that I had the intro which is actually the breakdown in the intro, because the intro definitely had to have been me being very into Discharge. I think I just really remember coming up with that kind of that repetitive Blur intro. And then the breakdown is just a stylized version of that. Mm-hmm. at halftime. And right then, that's half the battle. That you have the attention getter that starts the song, and you have the breakdown, which is absolutely necessary if you're going to participate in American punk rock music in the 80s.
Yeah, you needed the mosh part.
You needed the mosh part for sure. And it's not even so much the dancing for me. It was just like that's the release of the song. There's all this tension, and then this release comes from when you get down to something kind of halftimey or something at a slower tempo, which I love. I mean, I'm a sucker for that, and it's such a great tool.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that that act right there just refined itself into Quiet Loud, and that is definitely that American tradition of doing that kind of songwriting is reflected in a more refined version in Nirvana and their subsequent success. I mean,
sure, yeah, the Pixies, Nirvana, that was what their careers were built on. Quiet Loud.
Yeah, and great, because it's a great idea, and they both made really great music. So I'm a fan of how everything worked out.
Sure. So, it's almost hard to talk about some of this stuff with you. You're a hero of mine that became my friend, and I mean that with all my heart. And it's like, did you have any forethought, Brian, when you were doing this record of that, the influence, not just this record, Minor Threat, just, all those early projects, the influence that it would have? I mean, dude, you guys paved the road. By the time Less Than Jake started touring, 92, 93, the roadblock was gone. The road was open for us to do what we were doing. And that's because of the bands that did it in the 80s. I mean, there was no rule book. There was no playbook back then. You guys were flying by the seat of your pants. Did you ever think that you were making songs that would be revered 35 years later?
Oh, absolutely not. Not even a question. And I think that's probably why they, in some cases that lack of expectation, I think, makes something, gives it longevity. I mean, 100% certainly in Minor Threat, this was a high school band for me, and I had no idea that it would become a relatively significant part of like the American, alternative music songbook. I didn't know. We were, not looking beyond, the next couple of months, and we didn't really think it was that precious, which I think has, we broke up a couple times. You certainly, the interpersonal relationships of the band members were far more important than the music, when you think about it, because why would you break up something like that as well? Because we were teenagers, or at least a couple of us were, and we didn't know how to be in a band yet.
Right.
And, that was the thing. And, there's a little different thing to Dag Nasty, though, is that when I did Dag Nasty, it was after I had been in Minor Threat, and we broke up, and I was going to pretend to go to college, and that was unsuccessful. And I was playing in the Meatmen with my friend Tesco as kind of like a temp.
Yeah, I've read about that before. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he was funny, and he lived in DC at the time. And I had a couple projects that started and that just really kind of fizzled out. And I wasn't really, but the thing mainly was that I wasn't really paying attention to music. Music after Minor Threat, it was something I did, but I also was a motorcycle courier, and I was into, motorcycle tracks and it's hard to describe, but it just didn't become a priority. And with Dag Nasty, that was a conscious attempt. I don't know if I just woke up one day, but I said, you know what? I need to get a real band started, and I need to get out and see the world, or I'm just going to wind up, fucking around and getting a job. And that's absolutely not acceptable.
In any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and it wasn't that I thought that Dag Nasty could monetize an empire. The point was I needed to be doing something. I needed to do something creative, and I loved playing music, and I loved playing music live, and everything. The touring and all of the things that go with it are equally as important to me. As far the experience of doing it is so beautiful to me. And so in Dag Nasty, I'm like, I should do a band. I need to play punk music because I know how. and I need to put a band together that people who liked Minor Threat and Government Issue and The Descendants would like, because these are bands that I like. Like, it wasn't I wasn't like trying to build a copy machine. I was just like, look, I got to get I have to get myself aligned on what is it that I want to do, and I want to play music like this, and I need to find people who agree, who want to do it too.
Well, and it's just, again, it is amazing to me. You got to think back to the 80s, and that was my decade. That's when I was growing up as a teenager. And back then, I mean, you either ran with the pack and you sounded like everybody else, and you formed a metal band or a dance band or new wave, or you went against the grain and you were this punk band. Well, going against the grain in 92, 93, 94, when Less Than Jake was starting out, punk was just this massive thing, especially when Green Day and Offspring and all that hit, and again, the road was already paved with you guys. But back in the 80s, you were going to either follow the herd and be in some pop or metal band or some new wave band, or you were going to go against the grain and be a punk rocker and do what you guys were doing. By the time, Less Than Jake was getting going, 92, 93, 94, the road was already paved. And then you had, the Green Day and the Offspring and all that take off. And it was like this thing, like you could be part of it and it wasn't weird. Being in a punk band in the 80s was weird. I mean, you were looked down at, and here you are writing these, from Minor Threat and even into Dag Nasty, these socially conscious lyrics. Nobody was writing this stuff. I say nobody, very few bands. You look at these lyrics. What can I say? Why should I try? I tried to love what I knew I hated. I took a lie and I made a truth. I defended what I should have denied. I mean, where was this coming from? I mean, I know you mentioned Government Issue, Discharge. Of course, you were in Minor Threat, but where were these feelings coming from?
Well, I think that the key is that punk rock at that time was still protest music. And and also sort of like, there's a little bit of like self-help, a little therapy going on here. This is a purging. And this was the norm. It wasn't weird that you would have lyrics that, I mean, in looking at these lyrics, I'm sure that there were specific incidents that triggered some of the language. But in general, we were in the business of trying to figure out what the fuck is making the world go around and why are people the way they are. And this is a little different than, that's a cute girl, or what are you doing on Saturday night? And it's just sort of built into that hardcore punk ethic. And this is just, I think that history shows that the DC protests music was a little bit more about interpersonal, personal politics and interaction with peer groups rather than protesting a system or it didn't really have a lot of global significance in it, like in that sort of sense. Mm-hmm. So Dag Nasty, these lyrics are kind of in keeping with what everybody was doing then. It was just a natural thing. I mean, realize that we're contemporaries of Rites of Spring at this point. Like,
right.
Dag Nasty, Rites of Spring, Beefeater, Embrace. We all played shows together, and for honestly, Dag Nasty were like the jocks compared to those guys.
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys were definitely had more of a pop sense than someone like Embrace. There was a little bit more melody.
Well, but also there was fast songs still. Mm-hmm. Dag Nasty still went doopa doopa da doopa doopa da doopa doopa da. Like they we had not that basic early hardcore beat is still half that Can I Say record. Mm-hmm. So it was more, I don't know. We weren't quite as esoteric as those guys musically. But that lyrical, bent it really kind of just a product of what was happening there. It wouldn't occur to me to write music about smashing the state or getting fucked up at that point. It
right.
just wasn't it.
So back around this time, there was very few outlets. I mean, you had Maximum Rock and Roll and Flipside, but like, do you remember like the initial reviews and what people thought of it? I mean, this was at the time a new project.
I don't really know. I don't really remember because there were so few outlets. I mean, there were
Right.
right. There were a lot more fanzines at that point. By '85, there was a lot of fanzine culture was really pretty up there. And
Sure.
I mean, just to take a guess, I'm sure Maximum Rock and Roll hated it, and I bet Flipside thought it was good. and all of the other. I mean, I know that we had that people liked it in DC. That we built a pretty big following really quickly, and people really seem to enjoy the band, and that's awesome. I'm totally grateful.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Yeah! Down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard, PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
Right. I mean, you know, looking back, you had mentioned like fanzines. I mean, those were the original. Those were analog blogs and analog podcasts. And by that time, I think I first saw my first fanzine probably a little later than that. Like I said, probably when I was 88 or 89. And I was amazed by it that someone could create something in their bedroom. And a lot of it was copying, pasting stuff out of Maximum Rock and Roll and Flipside because they didn't have any content.
Yeah, for sure. I remember. I mean, fanzine. It was really prevalent. Actually, I mean, that's this. You know, we start out with Maximum Rock and Roll, and I remember when I was first reading that, and I'm assuming that came out in '81 was when Tim started that magazine, though I could be wrong. But the whole thing for me was the scene reports where they had satellite journalists in Salt Lake or in Detroit, and it was all coming into this Maximum Rock and Roll. That was a big portion of the magazine, is this sort of. And internationally, of course, too.
Right.
The other people who weren't afraid to use a telephone to call Norway.
At $8 a minute.
Yeah, but you know what? So what? You get 2 minutes. It's what's $16 going to buy you now? That's what I ask you.
Yeah, not much.
But that is then all of those scene reports turned into their own magazines. That's what was really cool. And so you get, because you collected them on tour, and that was a big thing. Like, I still have, I have a fraction of the Minor Threat ephemera that I had collected over the years, just due to, loss of work, sales.
Yeah.
I don't really have a complete library, but I do still have, I always picked up fanzines in every city that we played. And so I have, these yellowed, something from Raleigh, North Carolina, or the Gainesville, the Roach Motel guy did something. And,
Sure.
It was kind of almost an equal partner to the music, to the releases, and a whole culture of itself, in and of itself.
So take us back to those years. You put out a few records in the 80s with Dag Nasty, and what kind of, and I don't want to get into the breakup or this and that, but why do you think that it fizzled out? Because I think you guys were just such a fantastic band, and just to hear the influences. I mean, the other day on Shuffle, some Propaganda song came out, and I'm like, okay, they lifted that one from the Dag Nasty playbook. It's just blatant. I mean, it just sounds so much like, and there's so many other bands that have not only cited you as influences, but you can hear it in their music. And why do you think that it just didn't resonate like some of the other contemporaries from that time period that are still out there?
I think that there's a number of reasons. One, constant lineup changes. And, having three singers is confusing. Two, we didn't know we were doing anything important. So it's not like I had okay, I've refined this new sound that I'm going to make, and then I'm going to thread this through subsequent releases. Dag Nasty, all three records are very different from each other. They all have different people on them. The last record is the least good. So that doesn't help your legacy when you go from a high point and continue to go down.
Sure.
And whether that's true or not, that's the perception.
Mhm.
I think that there's strengths on all the records, but I will agree that Field Day, the Field Day is a record written by, I mean, I had just discovered pot and I lived on the beach in Hermosa Beach in LA. And like, what kind of angst comes from that gentle, bleach-haired, fucking tan stoner kid who's in his early 20s, who's never been to, living at the beach. I mean, oh God, life is tough.
Yeah.
And I don't, the songs are, I will say I'm still guilty of this, is that most of the songs I write sound like songs that I like already, or styles of music that I get into. It's like Dag Nasty, I was just, at that point, I was really I had just discovered stuff stone people like.
Uh-huh.
Because I'd never been stoned before.
Right.
So, like, hey, man, Robert Cray's a serious blues man. It's like, well,
Yeah.
no, you moron. That's like being into John Mayer, But
Yeah.
at the time, I like, oh, man, this is cool. I love Strats. And no one, because there were no stakes. There was no, we weren't really doing it. We were just going along. I don't know. Carrying on is a phrase they say a lot in New Jersey. Like, well, just carrying on.
Yeah, well, I mean, if someone tried to play you Robert Cray when you were living in the pink vomit house in D.C., you would have told them to fuck off. I mean,
No, of course not. I really told them to fuck off. And there's so much, in retrospect, there's so much learning I could have used, like so much, but I was just doing it,
Right. Well,
hey, Chris, you might know this one. Another thing about being a musician is not wanting to do the least possible to have shelter. Like, I will do the very least I can do to open myself up for all this free time where I'm going to do nothing. I mean, there's a laziness to being a musician that can't be denied.
Absolutely. Although, and I don't know, I want to see how you feel about this. I feel like it was definitely way worse when I was younger. I feel like as time goes by, I look at time a little more precious and I try to make better use of my time. Do you find that, or are you getting more complacent?
Oh, no. Now it's DEFCON 1. I'm just I'm 100% focused on this. And now I have a legacy to burnish. So,
I'm right. Well, yeah. And I can relate to that. It's just, you want to build on what you have. And for me, I don't want to lose it.
I want everything I do to be worthwhile. And I work really hard at that. And I don't want, the time has long past for clunkers. And, it's now, somehow I've kind of refined what I do into a style that is recognizable. And it's about working on that and seeing what I can do with that. Oh, it's a whole different mission statement now, because now I actually make a living playing music, and I have done so for decades. And so I know that to be, even mildly successful, you can't just be lazy. It's real work. And I treat it as such now because I'm a grown up and I'm sober, and I don't like Robert Cray anymore.
They took your pot away and you can't listen to it.
I didn't even know. All I had to do was read one book about the Rolling Stones, and I would have figured out exactly what was going on. But
yeah, well,
sure.
It's amazing to think now, because I remember when you first joined Bad Religion, and it seems like yesterday, but my God, it was 27 years ago now, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's just unreal. And to think that your tenure in that band eclipses pretty much the rest of the tenures of all of your bands is remarkable.
What can I say? It's a great job.
Yeah. And
I like working there, and I really love the people I work with. So
good for you. That is awesome. I got a couple of things I just want to discuss here, and I'll let you get on with your day. Over the years, starting back to even when you were a kid, and do you know when you hear a song, any song, do you know immediately that it's a hit? Or do you have to hear it a few times? Does it have to grow on you and be like, that's a hit, or that's going to be a hit?
I know it instantly.
Right.
Yeah. When you're talking about listening to other people's songs?
Yeah, other people's stuff. Yeah, like I always use the example of Smells Like Teen Spirit. I remember being in college, my first semester, and this dude played it for me, and I was just like, immediately, I'm like, this is massive. This is a hit song. It has every ingredient for a hit song. Like you know that when you hear it, yeah?
I think so. I mean, I might be a little with really modern stuff that doesn't have guitars in it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I am not a student of this of what's currently very, very popular with people, and I can't tell if I could listen to a mumble rap song and know if it was a hit or not.
Completely agreed. I'm still talking in and there's even some avant-garde post-punk weird stuff that ends up, maybe being a hit that I'm like, I don't get that. And so, I understand. I guess I'm speaking from a standpoint of anything that's in the realm of a rock, even a pop song, like, as much as I'm not going to put on the next Taylor Swift record anytime soon, no offense. But you listen to some of those songs, you're like, okay, that screams hit.
I for sure. If we're talking about if the caveat is we're dealing with guitar based familiar orchestration. I mean, Taylor Swift certainly counts in that as well as does as Discharge. I mean, that's still basically the same tools. I can definitely know if something is a hit because of I. It's like I can't listen to music without listening to how it's made anymore.
Right. Yes.
And when I'm hearing stuff, it's like, and something comes around, I'm like, oh boy, was that smart.
Yeah.
I love that. And I'm never just sitting back and listening to music. I'm analyzing music. And that's a byproduct of what I've been doing with my life.
Yeah, that is so cool for you to say. I mean, that's everything about songwriting that I'm so about today is when I hear songs and there's something that when we were first starting out that was primitive and we didn't listen to music like that I sometimes wish I still had that innocence, but at the same time, like the minute I hear a song, I'm immediately dissecting it. How is this working? Why is the pre-chorus only once the first time, but it's twice the second time? All that stuff that we analyze. It's so, to me, it's so cool.
Yeah, it is, but it's just a skill that you develop over all these years. And I don't think I'm missing out much by not naively enjoying stuff and not being interested into why it hits me a certain way.
Right, right.
I think my knowledge of how things are made contributes to my enjoyment.
Right on. Well, hey, gonna leave you with this. Lastly, here's your chance to let the listeners out there know what's going on with Brian Baker. This is time for your shameless plug. Go.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm never ashamed to plug. There's no such thing as just at 55 years of age here in lovely New Jersey. I am doing a number of things. Obviously we've had a bit of a pause for live music performance. And when you're in the people gathering business, like me, that's kind of a big shakeup. And I'm trying to take advantage of that in some ways. But Bad Religion would have been, still is celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. And there was a lot of touring and other cool stuff to go with it, which will have to be postponed. And then, of course, you have to, you can't use the T-shirts because it'd be the 41st year.
No one would buy them.
Who cares about the 41st year of anything? And I think by the time we actually get to play, maybe we shouldn't be talking about how cool we are and be more, maybe it should be the Grateful Tour rather than the. Anyway, I could go on and on, but yeah, we're gonna have to retool. But I mean, that's my thing. And that I just love being in this band. And that is my number one thing. I also have a new band called Fake Names. And we just had a record come out on Epitaph. It's a self-titled debut LP. And this is a band that I am in with Dennis Lixon from Refused. and two old friends of mine from DC who are also in just fantastic bands. Michael Hampton plays guitar, and he was in SOA, The Faith, and Embrace. And any fan of DC hardcore will immediately know who he is and the contribution that he made to our music there. And the bass player is Johnny Temple, who was in Soulside, was a DC band, like more of a mid 80s, 86, 87 band that was very, very important. And also in Girls Against Boys.
Wow.
Just another cool, like more of a major label kind of cool esoteric thing. And these guys, basically, I just started writing music with Michael Hampton because when I moved up to New Jersey, Michael lives in Brooklyn and he's a composer. And so he works from home and he's very good at writing music because that's what he's been doing for 20 years. And because I'm so close that I can just go up there and have lunch, we just started playing guitar again. I mean, this is a guy I've known since I was literally in first grade.
Wow.
So
that's great.
You know, out of this rekindling of our friendship due to proximity, we wound up writing music. And the next thing you know, we're trying to put a band together and we get it wind up just next thing you know, you got a Swedish rock star singing for you, which is, I guess, this is what you get with experience. Like when we went, let's just throw a little band together. And, you know, the pool that we're drawing from, I have to say, is probably a little different than the pool that some kids might be drawing from right now in, you know, Charlotte, North Carolina at their community college. I say this is the advantage of experience, that it's like, we found our singer because I knew Dennis from around, and Johnny and I were playing Riot Fest in Chicago, and he was playing in Girls Against Boys. I was playing in Bad Religion and Beach Rats on the same day. Double dip, the classic Greg Hetson double dip.
Yeah, the old move.
Yeah, oh, it's a good one too. And Refuse were playing, and ran into Dennis in catering. I was like, Dennis, Johnny and I have this new band. It sounds kind of like, you know, Slow Dag Nasty in DC. Do you want to be in it? And he's like, send me the tapes. And I sent him some tapes. He's like, I would like to be in the band. And that's how that happened. I mean, another, you know, classic no expectation. Like,
yeah, but how fun is that to reconnect with your buddies and there's no egos and it's just about the love of music and fun. That's beautiful.
Right. And that is my kind of grown-up music side project. And surprisingly, people really seem to like it. I mean, I was even shocked that Brett wanted to put it out. We made our own demo, and I played it for Brett because I wanted him to ask him if he knew, if he might know some like cool indie labels, like some small label, maybe in like Saskatchewan or Fort Myers, that might want to do a 7-inch with us or something. Like, honestly. And he's like, no, this is great. I want to put it out. And I'm like, you don't have to say that. It's cool. Like, I know we're in Bad Religion. I know, but come on, it's not a given.
Well, I did not know you had this going. I missed that. I'm definitely going to check it out. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, you'll love it. It's great. And he really dug it. And so he put it out, and now people are really enjoying it. And then the less grown up band I'm doing is Beach Rats, which is my local punk band. And that is, that's just something I think everybody has to have. You have to have that local, you know, ride around on beach cruisers, and the people who drink have, you know, tall boys in paper bags, and you're kind of cruising around the boardwalk, and then you cruise up and go to practice and maybe jam for a while and then go get pizza.
Yeah.
But everybody's 50. It's awesome. I mean, again, no expectations, but the point of that band is the interaction with it's playing with friends, and same with all of these. You know, I've been so fortunate, and that every band that I'm in now is playing with friends. I mean, I'm still in Dag Nasty.
Yeah.
I play in Dag Nasty with Roger and Colin and Sean, the original three dudes who I started the band with. And it's like time travel playing with those guys. It's, you know, just, it puts me right back into being 20 years old, and we have the same arguments and the same idiosyncrasies, and we make fun of each other the exact same way. We bring up shit that someone did to somebody else 35 years ago and rub it in their face.
Yeah.
At the gas station. It's like, it's perfect. So that's what this has all turned out to be, is just me hanging out with different friends and playing, slightly different variations of a bar chord with the last two strings ringing at the end.
Yeah, it's amazing that the only thing that's passed is the calendar. Everything else kind of stays the same, which is cool. All those little inside jokes still get under people's skin. I can relate.
So great.
Well, listen, Brian, I'm going to let you go. Man, thank you so much for giving me your time, and I'll be in touch. I love you, man. Appreciate it.
I love you too, Chris. I can't wait to see you in person when we can get back and get back to playing music with people around us.
Yes, I miss that more than ever right now.
That's why I'm sure everybody does.
Yeah. All right, bud. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
All right, cool. You too. I'll see you later.
Yeah, thanks.
Ready for a head-bangingly good time? Dive into the world of heavy metal with the Brutally Delicious podcast. Here, we don't just talk music. We welcome you into our heavy metal family. Join us for candid chats with legends and rising stars. We go beyond the typical interviews, exploring raw emotions and the life-altering impact of heavy metal. So whether you're a diehard metalhead or just curious, join our family and let the headbanging begin with the Brutally Delicious podcast.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know, where each week I will preview a select band of my choice, tell you a little bit about the band, where they're from, where to find their music, and how to find them on social media. It's simple, really. If you'd like your band to be previewed on Chris DeMakes a Podcast, all you have to do is submit your song and bio to bandyoumightnotknow@gmail.com. All I ask for is a good quality recording of a song you feel best represents your band. This week's featured band is Cassettes from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I love these guys. I love their sound. Totally 80s. Of course, Cassettes were popular in the 80s, so the name fits the band perfectly. I love their sound. On guitar and vocals, we got Matt DiStefano. On guitar, Jim Fox. Chris Hill on keys and vocals. Joe Robinson on bass, and Sean Ward on drums. You can find their music on Bandcamp, and you can find them online on Instagram at Cassettes Forever. Here's a snippet of their song, I Wanna Know.
I wanna know what your favorite drink is. I wanna know what my nephew's thinking. I wanna know what you deal. I wanna know how to feel. I wanna know. I wanna meet and fall in love with my best friend. I never wanna have to sell my records ever again. I wanna know all your jokes. I wanna know every note. I wanna know. But I just can't seem to breathe as deeply as I need. And I just can't
The Wrap with Chris and Chris.
So that was pretty awesome to have such a punk rock pioneer as Brian Baker on this episode, man.
Yeah, I have to agree. I was not gonna lie, I was starstruck when I first met Brian. Geez, it would have been back on the Warped Tour back in the '90s, and I'm just knowing Brian now, I remember the look on his face, like, get away from me, kid, because I was just fawning over him. But he's a legend, man.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty funny when you meet those people that are from the generation before of what you do. When you meet your peers all the time, but the people that are from the generation before, that's always kind of wild and intimidating. But Brian seems really friendly and nice. Like I feel like talk to that guy for 1 minute and maybe you won't be so intimidated.
No, he is. He's just he's very, and it didn't really come off too much in the episode, but he's one of the most sarcastic people I've ever met, and I mean that in a great way. He's just really snide but in a funny way, and he likes to bitch and complain, and he's awesome. He's a lot of fun. Every time we get together. Less Than Jake did a tour with Bad Religion last year, and it's you may not have seen Brian for a year or two, but he's one of those guys you just pick right back up where you left off. What you get is what you get with him.
That's cool, man. And something you guys talked about on this episode is the fact that when Brian was doing that thing we do and touring and things like that, especially back in the Minor Threat days, that was still like touring in a punk rock band was still a relatively new thing, and it was maybe considered a dangerous thing, or it wasn't like what you and I have experienced of, you have this circuit of clubs that you play, and it's a well-worn path of the way to work your way up. It was kind of like they were in the Wild West of what they were doing.
You took the words out of my mouth. It was the Wild West. It's exactly what it was. It was. I mean, bands, and we've touched on this in the episode with Rick Nielsen. Bands back in the 70s, up into the early 80s, they were out. They were essentially cover bands. You'd get booked into a venue, you do 3, 4, 5 sets a night, and lather, rinse, repeat. That was the thing. And these punk rockers were going out playing original music in a lot of times non-traditional venues. They'd show up at a VFW hall, and the police would be driving by and seeing these people with mohawks, like, "Ooh, these people are dangerous,"
Right.
And there was skinheads. There was all kinds of things that were going on. It was basically the misfits of society that were hanging out at a lot of these shows. And without Brian and Minor Threat and even some of the bands that preceded them, Ramones, Sex Pistols, etc. There's no way that a band like Less Than Jake would have had the opportunity to do what we do.
Right. And I think one thing that's really cool seems to be the thing in common with most things that Brian Baker is involved in is, when it comes to the songwriting, is socially conscious lyrics. And I think that's really cool. I know your band and my band, we've both, have that element to some of our music, but we also have the love songs and we also have the personal songs. But the lyrics of bands like Minor Threat and Dag Nasty and Bad Religion, like, oh my, like that is music that is trying to, in its own way, change the world and has, and that is such a cool thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I had made a point that no one sounded like Dag Nasty in 1986. I
Right.
mean, they were. I mean, Minor Threat was, still pretty rough around the edges. They were really punk rock, and the lyrical content was a lot of the same themes in Dag Nasty, but there was a pop sensibility to it. Dag Nasty's recordings were really clean for that time. Punk rock was really dirty and raw and sloppy, and Dag Nasty was kind of the opposite of that. But yet there was still this unbridled energy and angst to it that came through. But when I heard them around that time, 86, 87, again, I had never heard anything like it. I was a pretty sheltered kid living in nowhere, Florida, and it was commercial radio and MTV, and they were not playing Dag Nasty. I could tell you that.
Yeah, man. 1986. Yeah, it wasn't Dag Nasty. It was Motley Crue and Janet Jackson and Huey Lewis and the News. And not that I don't love all that, but yeah, there wasn't a lot of Dag Nasty on MTV and the radio. But hey, maybe that's a good thing, man.
Yeah, it definitely it was so different from everything to this small town kid from Florida that it really stuck out and resonated with me. And again, I was just I know you were too, super stoked to have Brian on the podcast, and it was another great episode, man.
Hell yeah, it was.
So, I want to give a special shout out to all the listeners out there. Thank you for continuing to support not just my endeavors outside of the podcast and Less Than Jake, but Chris Afalios, our wonderful producer here as well. You guys.
Thank you, guys.
Yes. Thank you very much. We as musicians are always looking for ways to stay busy. And obviously touring is a huge part of a band like Less Than Jake. But aside from myself, the guys in my band have been staying busy as well. I'd like to give a big shout out right now to Mr. Roger Lima, the bass player for Less Than Jake. Roger has a studio called Modehouse Recording Studio down in Gainesville, Florida. And it's where Less Than Jake recorded a ton of our projects over the years. Our See the Light record in 2013, our EP Sound the Alarm in 2017, and our most recent record that is coming out soon, Silver Linings, was tracked there. Roger's available for mastering, mixing, tracking, producing, editing, all the above and then some. You can email him directly. Go to rehasher.com. That's REHASHER.com, rehasher.com. Or you can find him on Facebook at Modehouse Recording Studio. Roger would like to hear from you, and he'll take good care of you. So just wanted to give a shout out to my bro. We're all trying to navigate these waters while we're not on tour, Chris.
Yeah, man, dude, Roger's a beast too. That last tour that Punchline did with Less Than Jake, when he first let us hear that new Suicide Machines album, we were like, whoa.
Yeah, he did the latest Suicide Machines record, Revolution Spring, and that thing came out awesome.
Dude, yeah. If you're on the fence about going with Roger, go listen to Revolution Spring and you will be convinced.
Give him some love.
Hell yeah. Yeah, and also I want to thank everybody who listened, who contributed on ChrisDeMakes.com. We now have a monthly cause that we like to get behind. And our very first one was Big Brothers and Big Sisters of the Laurel region. That's near me. I asked Chris if that could be our first one, and he was all about it. And we set a goal of $1,000. We didn't know what to expect, and you guys already surpassed that. But let's keep it going. We got a couple more weeks to go. If you guys enjoy the podcast, it's a free podcast. We don't charge anything for this podcast. All we ask is that if you can, chip in $1 or $2 or $3. The cost of a Dr. Pepper. If you add that up among thousands of people that subscribe to our podcast, that can add up and help a lot of kids. So I think that's really cool. Just go to ChrisDeMakesADifference.com.
Right on. Thanks to each and every one of you for your generosity, and we will see you next week.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard, PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
Ready for a head-bangingly good time? Dive into the world of heavy metal with the Brutally Delicious podcast. Here, we don't just talk music. We welcome you into our heavy metal family. Join us for candid chats with legends and rising stars. We go beyond the typical interviews, exploring raw emotions and the life-altering impact of heavy metal. So whether you're a diehard metalhead or just curious, join our family and let the headbanging begin with the Brutally Delicious podcast.